I would say the first one would just be, yeah, I guess I'm tackling two things at once. But I would say like the first thing about just jihad, like coming to someone and talking to them about the meaning of jihad, and then they bounce off to Sharia. Like
Okay.
I'm not sure how they got to it from there, but
Well, because it's one of the hot topics, right? You have jihad, sharia, and hijab. Those are the three hot topics about Islam. Those are the things.
mhm.
If you can answer questions about hijab, sharia, and jihad, you're all set for the most part. Because hijab means basically all the women's questions, not just about hijab itself. But it's kind of a limerick that I use. Jihad, sharia, hijab, and then those are the three categories of question. Questions about women, questions about politics, and question about law and punishment. So I'll try to answer your question, inshallah. When it comes to jihad, the first thing you tell people is that jihad comes from the root word jahada, which means to struggle. And it
Mhm.
means any struggle against injustice. That's what you have to understand. That's the key that ties it all together. So injustice against your own nafs, that's the jihadun nafs. That when you're being unjust to yourself, or you're basically harming yourself with whatever sins or vices you're doing, that is a jihad, because you're fighting against that injustice. Jihadul lisan, the jihad of the tongue. There's an evil that you see out there, and so you're trying to speak out against it because it's injustice. And then finally you have jihadul yad, the jihad of the hands, which is something bad is happening, you have to try to stop it with your hands. And that includes stopping aggression, persecution, or people who are trying to kick you out of your home. You have the right to fight in that way. You see what I'm saying? Because it's all
Mhm.
about fighting injustice, whether it's in your own self, in your community, or outside, if somebody is aggressing against you from outside and you want to fight against that. All right. Now, when they say, well, what about your Sharia? What kind of community is that? Because you have all these laws. And you say, listen, brother, in the 1800s and the 1700s, British law had over 200 death penalty offenses for stealing your neighbor's garden, or fishing in your neighbor's pond, or taking firewood. And the reason why is because pre-modern societies, they didn't have the police, the kind of police work that we have now. So many of the criminals, they got away without any punishment. And in pre-modern societies, the way that you deter people, I mean, the first thing you say is the Islamic law penalties, not Islamic law. The penalties in Islamic law are so harsh to act as a deterrent, so people don't do these in the first place. And the reason why they're so harsh is because if you have deterrence is only as good as what is your likelihood of being caught times how severe is the penalty. And you can use the example of the $1,000 littering fine, or the $300, $400, parking in a handicapped place fine, right? In that it's a punishment that's intended to scare the people away from doing it in the first place, so they don't even think about it. And then you talk about, and by the way, these penalties were never intended to be implemented except in the most heinous and brazen of cases. You talk about, rudd al-hudud bil-shubuhat. The Prophet said, and his companions said, and the early classical scholars said, you should avoid the hudud penalties as much as possible by finding ambiguities that could get the person off. Look for the technicalities to let the guy off, because it's better for a ruler to make a mistake in forgiving than to make a mistake in punishing, right? And said, oh, but how about these people like Daesh? And it's like, yeah, they forget that the harsh penalty has to be counterbalanced by the mercy of you're not looking out to catch the people and cut off their hands or flog them or stone them. That's not the point. The point is, law is our teacher. They're on the books so that there's a statement of morality that this society finds, public drunkenness and public fornication and stealing things which are hidden and valuable where no one else can catch you, that's a very heinous offense, and this society wants to make a clear statement that these actions are bad, and they're so bad, they're so heinous. That's why the penalty is like that. Now, if somebody actually does do this, but they don't have the full level of evidence, then they get a smaller punishment. They get imprisoned for a few days. They get 10 lashes or something, or they're banished from the place, or whatever. Our history, our rich Islamic history, is filled with cases like these. There were people who were caught in bed. There were people who stole from the public treasury. There were people who were drunk, and they were drunk while giving a speech. And they were the governor of the province, and they didn't take the hudud penalty. They were dismissed from their post, and they had something else happen. They were imprisoned for a few days. Maybe they got 10 lashes in public, and they were let go, right? So when you're talking about the two things, realize that what people are trying to do against you is they're trying to cherry pick the hadith, which are harsh, and say, this is what you believe. I say, no, I believe that the action is so bad and heinous and it is such an affront to the sensibilities of Allah and the sensibilities of God-fearing men that the punishment should be that. But in practicality, we never have the level of evidence required to prosecute that level. So usually the person will get off with a few days in prison, or maybe paying a fine, or taking, being flogged 10 or 15 times, and that's it. Did that answer your question?
Yes, Jazakallah khair. It clears it up for me. It's just because I got into a recent conversation with someone, and I just needed to clear that up. I know it's very detailed and specific, but Jazakallah khair.
Alhamdulillah. Inshallah, listen to the recording and then take notes so you can just have the bullet points. 1, 2, 3, 4, done.
Sounds good, inshallah, yeah.
All right, other questions, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, Brother Adam.
Yeah, I have a question. So let's say in like an American court case or something, one person, like two people happen to commit zina, and let's say in a public place or something, like a strip club or whatever. And let's say if they wanted to go visit a Muslim country that implements Sharia, but they were caught previously in America or someplace that doesn't implement Sharia, and it's and already had to go through the trial and everything. They were accused of the crime, and well, maybe not accused, but I don't know. Let's say if people just commit zina and they happen to go to a place that involves Sharia, so would they receive a punishment for committing a sin like that, like a hudud punishment?
Usually not. This has actually already happened, by the way. This is not something new. So first of all, so you're saying people are used to doing this kind of crime in a country that does not implement Sharia, and then they go to a Muslim country which has this law on the books, and then they do it there as well, and they get caught, right? So in Dubai, as well as the Emirates and Oman, this has actually happened, where you have tourists who come in and they start having intimate relations on a public beach. And so usually what ends up happening is that they get accused of public indecency and not of zina. And the reason why is they say, well, there's no proof that they weren't married to each other. We're not going to ask. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Especially if they're not nationals. They just kick them out of the country. They say, we'll just take the banishment penalty. You're out. Your visa is revoked. And 10 years before you can come back into our country because what you did was pretty bad. Now, if you're talking about, well, what about someone who's in that country? Like they're actually from that country. And like I said, even today in countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran and Sudan and those types of places, there are zina laws on there, and they almost always reduce the hudud from hudud level to just ta'zir. Okay? And the reason why is because unless you actually have 4 independent witnesses to the act of penetration itself, that does not, it has to be eyewitnesses. Cell phone cameras doesn't count. It has to be an actual eyewitness of seeing this, and then they both tell the same story with all the details. That has almost never happened, even in a place like Saudi Arabia. Maybe you'll get one cell phone, or you'll get this, you'll get something else. You don't have the full level of evidence. So the judge will say, okay, it's no, he reduces it from hudud level, it gets recategorized as ta'zir level, and he gives the people, usually some lashes or something like that. That's what happened in Saudi Arabia.
All right. And I also heard the witnesses for those who committed zina, they have to be 4 male witnesses.
No, that's not true.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Other questions?
Brother Ahmed.
Yes, Brother Wafi.
Can you speak Arabic?
Yes, you want to speak Arabic?
Just a little bit, yeah, just a small question.
Okay.
The best way to explain for those Americans or يعني أحسن طريقة نقول إنه حرام. The best way to say it, because they face this problem in my life every day here in America. When you say that it's haram, it's like you get a fence, what this Islam is say, everything is haram. The best way, you understand me now?
Subhanallah. You know what, Brother Wafi? I feel very embarrassed now because I actually had one slide that talked about this. It's in Dr. Jonathan Brown's article. He says near the very end is that actually at the end of the day, when you realize the similarity between hudud penalties and British law in the 1800s and 1700s, and you realize how it's all about deterrence and not actually punishing the people. Dr. Brown makes a very good point. He says, most of the time, brothers, he says, most of the time, the issue is not about the penalty itself. It's that why is this considered a crime to begin with? Why is something like zina considered a sin to begin with? And he actually has a really, I really recommend everybody to go to that article. Go to yaqininstitute.org and search up Jonathan Brown, and basically talks about, cutting off hands and stoning is understanding Islamic law and Sharia in Islam. He talks about how the real issue, once you talk to people about and you explain how, the hudud penalties are supposed to be avoided, it's there for deterrence, it's a statement of how a God-conscious society is supposed to act, right? You talk about all of these legal understandings, all these logical things, and then say, but why is it haram aslan? Why is it a sin? Why is it a crime? And that's the real point that Dr. Brown says, is that most of their criticism is not about the mechanics of doing the law, because there was adultery laws in America just 50 years ago. In the 1960s, you could actually spend jail time, and in some of the southern states, you would be flogged for having an affair, with somebody else's wife. It was on the books. So it's not about the mechanics of punishment. It's about the concept that zina or stealing is so bad of a sin that it's actually a crime. And we talked about that. Tell them, look, like that previous slide. Let me see if I can find it again. These laws exist primarily to remind people of the enormity of the sins that they usually get away with, right? Sariqa and zina, those are private crimes. For the most part, you don't do that in front of an audience, right? And the point of the harsh law is to make a moral statement that our society is a God-conscious society, where even though we know, if you look at the medieval Islamic texts, brothers, zina was happening all over the place, even in the Khalifa of Harun al-Rashid, even in the Abbasid Empire, even the Ottoman Empire, even the Umayyad Empire, if you go further back, it was happening. Umar al-Khattab, when he was the Amir al-Mu'mineen, he actually stumbled across two people committing zina in the alleys of Medina. And he ran to the Chief Justice at the time, who was Ali ibn Abi Talib, and he said, I saw this, I saw this, I saw this. I know these people. They're not married to each other. That man is married to this woman, and this woman is married to that man. We need to stone them now. And Ali said, slow down, bro. Well, he didn't say that, but he basically said, are you the only witness to this? And Umar said, yes. So Umar said, I throw out the case. We can't take it. You don't have your 4 witnesses. He says, but I'm home. He says, Ya Ali, Ya Abul Hassan, I saw what I saw, and I am whom I am. And he said, if you don't stop saying this, I'm going to accuse you of slandering the chaste woman that's mentioned in Surah An-Nur, and you are the one who's going to get flogged 80 stripes. You see? So this is the understanding, is that, brothers, human beings are human beings. People will do sins, even these kinds of sins. The point is not, do people do the sins or not? The point is, do you live in a society which is accepting of that it's normalizing it? There was homosexuality, and there was zina, and there was drunkenness, and there was people smoking hashish and smoking opium, and they were doing, highway robbery and stealing and embezzlement. People are people. Human beings are human beings, whether you say La ilaha illallah or you don't. And everyone has the same temptations as others. Some more than others, but all of the temptations are there. And so it is not about what people like Daesh and ISIS are saying, that, we want to play a perfect, pristine community where none of these sins happen. No. The whole point of the hudud law is that you don't want this to be happening in public. You don't want these sins to become so commonplace that they become normalized and accepted. That's the point. So when like I said, like Dr. Jonathan said, most of the argument, like Brother Wafi had mentioned, it's not about the technicalities of implementing the law, because the punishments can be averted. You find a loophole, you find an excuse, you find something that says, okay, I can't sentence the full penalty, so we have to do a lesser penalty. That happens all the time. The issue, wallahi, is that they don't like the idea that zina is considered a sin and therefore, and even a crime against the society, because it breaks up the families. And we talked about this in actually the first section, that zina is explicitly, unconditionally, and generally denounced, right? لا تقربوا الزنا إنه فاحش وإنه فاحشة وساء السبيل. It is a fahisha and it's ساء السبيل. It's both. It is an evil deed. It is a shameless deed, a shameful deed, and ساء السبيل. It's a bad path. It's a bad way. You see what I'm trying to say? I know that I talked a lot, so I apologize, Brother Wefi, for taking up so much time. But does that kind of get to what your question is?
Yes, thank you so much. That's very clarified. Thank you so much.
Barakallah fiqh.
We still like, I'm talking like about regular people here, because when you work with Americans, it's like, this is shahwa, you know. When you talk about Islam, you talk about shahwa, you know.
Yeah.
It's hard to start saying it's haram. We will never start with this point. We need to come from the faith side. I was talking about Catholic guy. He just like give me like hard time. He doesn't know I'm Muslim. When like I have bread with him, it takes time. Just say I am Muslim. But what you said is not true. You and I never start with this haram word. I advise my clients to stop using this word with this player. Use another word, you know. Use like when they have a faith, when they have become like good people, they will understand what you are saying. But when we start with haram, we stop everything. You know, that's why I ask this question for you. Thank you so much, Brother Rahman.
Barakallah fiqh. Barakallah fiqh. All right. Other questions, inshallah. Other questions, inshallah. Questions going once.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Just a remark about something that you mentioned about instead of I mean, in the case of establishing hudud, you have to have 4 witnesses, أربعة شهود. Why would it not be equivalent to, for example, why is there the video is not a proof to consider? I mean, if a video have been made 4 people watching that video and they are udul, why wouldn't they be, or why the video wouldn't be the equivalent of 4 shuhud, since it happens and it's not like a made up video?
Well, because a lot of them are made up, brother. That's one thing. And subhanAllah, this was actually addressed in the Islamic conference back in the 90s, or the late 80s actually, when the question was brought about, you know, pornography and things like that. And the scholars at the time, they said the Sharia, the Quran says 4 witnesses, and the example of our messenger and the example of the Sahaba after him, that they required the actual eyewitnessing. And so they said it'll be a very big step to go from eyewitness to, you know, a video recording. And they had mentioned that also the recording could be doctored. It could be changed. A person could take one person's face over another's face, and therefore you could do dhulm on people. And even nowadays, I mean, right now, the technology is such that happens all the time. There are people, they take the face of and it's like, it's considered, it's really bad right now, where people will harass women and sometimes even blackmail men. They'll take a picture of the guy and they'll slap, or the woman, their face, and they'll put it on a video like this to try to smear their reputation. So even back then, before that technology was so available, the Muslim scholars had mentioned this. But the real reason why that this is not considered the hudud level penalty is because the idea is that you don't want it to be something that is open. Even when you have that video, you have to do something special to access that video. It's no longer in public like the people who were in Dubai and they were doing this, they were doing the act on a public beach in front of, you know, the children and people and the families. It's not like that. It's not like you are coming into the public space. And this is something that Ali ibn Abi Talib had mentioned, is that there's so many sins that a person can commit in private. And we will only prosecute with the hudud of Allah if he brings it into the public. So even someone who's making a pornographic film, Even someone who's doing this kind of a thing, and yes, they're all udul around them, and that's fine. We understand that. So technically you are correct. However, the point is that that film, that ibahiyya, that fahisha is not broadcast to the general public. It's kept private. It's kept on this website or that website, and only the one who wants to see this kind of thing will go to that website. Do you see what I'm trying to say, brother?
Yeah, yeah.
So remember that the idea is, the purpose of the hudud penalty is not to try to catch as many people as possible and implement the hudud as much as you can. That's not the point. The point is that the people who are doing this film and the ones who are photographing that film, they should realize that how enormous in the eyes of Allah is this. And even the Prophet ﷺ, when he made Isra and Mi'raj, he talked about one of the very, very harsh punishments for the people who commit zina and those who spread zina in the community. And Surah An-Nur talks about, they want to yaziyul fahisha fil mu'minin. They want to spread the fahisha among the believers. So this is the kind of punishment that it could be, right? But realize, brother, that there were a little known fact. I just want to close up with this because, again, historical context. There's a very little known fact that in Medina, the city of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, during the time of the Aws and the Khazraj, they had a huge problem of prostitution. There were brothels all over the place. And the Prophet came into this community with the Muhajirin. And so these laws were sent, even though it was known that this woman is a baghiya, this woman is doing this, that man has gone to this place. It was known. But Allah's Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, rahmatan lil alameen, he never did. And even Umar ibn al-Khattab, and Umar ibn al-Khattab is very tough, right? Even Umar al-Khattab never did what Daesh did in Iraq and Syria. They didn't go charging into these places, these known houses of zina, and start killing the people inside. He did not do that. Why? As-sitr. Ustur akhik, rabbini yusturuk yawm al-qiyamah. This was the comment. They said, cover your brother, even when he does the wrong, and Allah will cover you on the Day of Judgment. But how can we say that this is at the same time haram, and it's a big fahisha, and the punishment is this, and then we don't implement it? Look at the slideshow again, your brother. The whole point, number one, to make a statement in the hearts of the people, what a big deal this is. Number two, to scare the people who are thinking about doing it against doing it. And number three, as Uthman ibn Affan said, that the hudud is to scare the one who doesn't have the fear of Allah. So that even the one who is interested in doing it and makes the azima and actually does it, at least yahtarim nafsu, and he does it privately. He doesn't, make a public show out of it. And so only if it goes to the live eyewitness, that's the level that the Prophet had received from Allah, and all the Sahaba confirmed that. And even when video technology became available, the Muslim scholars, they talked about this. And they said that the video would be enough. Remember I talked about in the previous slide that a person who, I think I had it here somewhere. Yes. So even if you found a married couple or an unmarried couple naked in bed, but you don't have the actual witnesses, that's not enough for hudud. But it is enough for ta'zir. So they can be punished at the ta'zir level. So they're not getting away, right? I keep saying, it's not like Islamic law says, oh, it's just a game. We make this big show, but in reality, we don't do it. No, there is ta'zir. And situations like this, and even what you've talked about, happen so many times. Modern day Saudi Arabia and Iran, a person finds a cell phone of his wife, it has a bad video on it, he takes her to the authorities, they can't implement hudud on her, or the vice versa, they can't implement the hudud on the man when he's cheating on his wife, but they can do ta'zir. You see? So there is a punishment, but it's not that level. Wallahu alam.
Yes, jazakallah khaira. I want to just make not a statement, but I would say, if you remember the woman who, in the time of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when she did zina and she came to Rasulullah sallallahu, and she was a witness against herself, and she did say it 4 times.
Yes.
And Rasulullah wanted to do the hudud, but he, since she had a baby, he told her to go forever time, like 2 years. That's the time that was for the لمن أراد أن يتم
Yeah, to
الرضاعة.
nurse the baby. Yep, to
Yeah.
breastfeeding.
So would you say that at the time, if the woman didn't show up after that, is the authority would be going looking for her? So
No.
that,
The Prophet,
no?
there's another, no, because the Prophet mentioned that in that the scholars, they have this. I mean, this is the Gumhur. They all agree upon this. The classical case, you're right. This case was talked about by the Mufassirin and by the Muhaddithin, and they said if, that basically he required her to bear witness against herself 4 times,
4 times.
in order that to happen. And each time they said, if the woman didn't come back and said, Ya Rasulullah, you told me, a few months ago, and here I am, he would not go after her. When the hudud is not about chasing after people.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, people like Daesh and Al-Qaeda and Boko Haram and all the other extremist groups, they think that no, they have to go. Allah will punish them on the Day of Judgment. As I was saying, when the Prophet went to Isra and Mi'raj and he saw the punishment of the people who commit zina, and it was very, very terrible. Very, very terrible. And it scared the companions. He said, because this Indallahi kabir, in the eyes of Allah, it's huge. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yep.
However, that huge is in the heart. And as like Ali ibn Abi Talib said, Allah will punish them. You don't have to go chase after the people so you can punish them. Allah will punish them. The only time that you are authorized by Allah and His Messenger ﷺ to implement this punishment in the dunya is if they make it this kind of way. And if the woman did not come back, or if the man that did not come back, the Prophet would not have gone after them. You see what I'm saying? In fact, it's very well known that because this happened during the, I think it was during the Ottoman Empire, there was a Hanafi judge and a Shafi'i magistrate. It was a big political scandal, right? Where one of the wazirs of the Ottoman Empire was caught with the wife of a Hanafi judge. It was a big scandal. And the 2 people, they were caught naked in bed and they confessed. And they confessed 4 times. And then when the judge said, okay, we're going to pass down the sentence, they retracted their confession. And all the scholars said, okay, that's it. If they rescind their confession, khalas, it's as if it doesn't happen. Let them go. Allah will deal with them. You see? So, yes, thank you for the clarification, brother.
You're welcome.
Other questions, inshallah? Questions going once. Questions going twice. Yes,
Yeah,
brother
just
Adam.
another question. So why, going back to the thing I heard about like the 4 male witnesses, why do the scholars, at least why have they thought like they need to be male instead of female? If this
There is a difference of opinion in that. There are those who said, like we had talked about in the previous session, about the witnessing of women, 2 women equals 1 man only in the case of, deferred contract for debt, a deferred debt contract, a contract for deferred debt. But there were some scholars who said that it will be more rahma, it will be more ambiguous, because most of the time, the people who were in the houses and who stumbled across people committing zina, they were women. Most of the time, there was the women who were in the house, not the men. And so they made their ijtihad, and they said, if we do the 2 for 1 for this case, it'll be more rahma, more ambiguity, more shubuhat, because that means it has to be really a big deal for 8 women to see this, or 2 women and 3 men, or 4 women and 2 men, that kind of a thing. That was their reasoning. It's not because 2 equals 1, but it's because they said it'll be more difficult to establish the hudud penalty. Because even back then, most of the time when people commit zina, they're in a bedroom. And most of the people who would be dealing with it were the female servants. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it.
Yep.
Thank you.